Welcome back to Take the Leap Management, the podcast that helps you navigate the world of management, leadership, and academic success. I'm your host, and today we're diving into a topic that's essential for anyone conducting research: how to create a solid research method. Whether you're working on a class project, your thesis, or a larger research paper, the method you choose is the backbone of your study. Without a clear, reliable research method, even the best research question won't yield meaningful results. Today, we'll walk through the basics of research methods, including the difference between qualitative and quantitative approaches, how to choose the right method for your study, and practical tips for designing your research process. By the end of this episode, you'll have a much clearer sense of how to approach your research method with confidence. So, let's start with the basics. What exactly is a research method? A research method is essentially the strategy or process you use to collect, analyze, and interpret data in your study. Your method is how you answer your research question or test your hypothesis. It involves everything from the type of data you collect, like numbers, interviews, or surveys, to how you analyze that data to draw conclusions. One of the most important decisions you'll make early on in your research process is whether to use qualitative or quantitative methods, or sometimes a combination of both, which is known as a mixed methods approach. Let's take a closer look at each of these approaches. We'll start with quantitative research methods. These are used when you want to collect data that can be measured and quantified. Quantitative methods are great for studies where you're looking to gather numerical data, find patterns, or test a specific hypothesis. For example, let's say you're interested in studying employee motivation. A quantitative approach might involve sending out surveys with Likert scale questions like, on a scale from 1 to 5, how motivated do you feel at work? You could send this survey to 200 employees and then analyze the data statistically to see if there's a pattern. Maybe you find that employees who receive regular feedback from their manager report higher levels of motivation. Quantitative research is often used when you want to generalize your findings to a larger population, and it typically involves larger sample sizes than qualitative research. Some common methods for collecting quantitative data include surveys. As I mentioned, surveys are a great way to collect numerical data on people's opinions, behaviors, or experiences. You can distribute surveys online or in person, and the responses are usually easy to quantify and analyze statistically. Experiments. If you want to test cause and effect relationships, an experiment might be the best approach. For example, you could implement a leadership training program in one department and not in another. Then measure productivity levels before and after in both groups. This helps you see whether the training had a measurable impact. Secondary data analysis. Sometimes rather than collecting your own data, you might analyze existing data sets like census data, company reports, or academic data sets to answer your research question. The advantage of quantitative research is that it provides clear, objective data, and you can often use statistics to determine whether your findings are significant. However, one limitation is that quantitative methods don't always capture the nuance of people's experiences or emotions. This is where qualitative research methods come into play. Qualitative research is all about exploring experiences, ideas, and perspectives in depth. Instead of trying to quantify data, qualitative methods aim to provide a more detailed and descriptive understanding of the topic you're studying. Let's go back to the example of employee motivation. If you're using a qualitative approach, you might conduct in-depth interviews with employees to understand how they feel about their work environment, what motivates them, and what challenges they face. Rather than gathering numerical data, you'd be collecting rich, detailed responses that give you deeper insights into people's thoughts and experiences. Qualitative research is often used when you're exploring new areas or seeking to understand complex social phenomena. It's particularly useful when you're working with smaller sample sizes and want to get a detailed picture of a specific group or situation. Some common qualitative methods include interviews. One-on-one interviews allow you to ask open-ended questions and probe deeper into the subject. For instance, you could ask, "What motivates you to stay at your job?" and then follow up based on the person's response. This kind of conversation can provide insights that a simple survey might miss. Focus groups. Focus groups bring together a small group of people to discuss a particular topic or issue. This is useful for exploring group dynamics or gathering a range of perspectives on a topic. For example, you could hold a focus group with employees to discuss their experiences with a new company policy. Case studies. A case study involves an in-depth examination of a particular individual, group, or organization. If you're interested in how a specific company improved employee morale, you might conduct a case study on that company, gathering detailed information through interviews, observations, and documents. Qualitative research provides a depth of understanding that quantitative data can't always achieve. However, one limitation is that it's often harder to generalize the findings to a larger population because qualitative research typically involves smaller sample sizes and is more focused on specific contexts. Now that we've covered the basics of qualitative and quantitative research, let's talk about choosing the right method for your study. The method you choose should align with your research question, the type of data you need, and the goals of your study. If your research question is focused on how many or how much, you'll likely lean toward a quantitative approach. For example, if you're studying employee absenteeism, you might ask, how many days of work are lost annually due to absenteeism in mid-sized companies? That's something you can measure with numerical data, so a quantitative method would make sense. On the other hand, if your research question is about why or how, a qualitative approach might be better. For example, if you're asking, why do employees choose to stay in their jobs despite low satisfaction levels? You'll want to explore personal experiences and motivations, which are better suited to qualitative methods. And then there's the option of mixed methods, which combines both qualitative and quantitative approaches. This can be especially powerful because it allows you to gather comprehensive data. For example, you could start by collecting quantitative survey data on employee satisfaction and then follow up with in-depth interviews to understand the reasons behind the survey responses. Mixed methods give you both the breadth of quantitative data and the depth of qualitative insights. So, how do you go about designing your research method once you've chosen an approach? First, you'll need to think about sampling. That is how you'll select your participants or data sources. For quantitative research, you'll want to ensure your sample is large enough and representative enough to draw valid conclusions. In qualitative research, you'll be more focused on choosing participants who can provide rich, detailed insights, even if the sample size is smaller. Next, you need to decide on your data collection methods. Are you conducting surveys, interviews, experiments, or observations? Make sure your method aligns with your research question and that you have a clear plan for how you'll gather the data. For example, if you're using surveys, how will you distribute them? If you're conducting interviews, what will your interview guide look like? Once you've collected your data, the next step is analysis. For quantitative data, you'll likely use statistical tools to analyze your results. You might calculate averages, run regressions, or perform hypothesis testing to see if your findings are significant. For qualitative data, analysis typically involves coding your responses, identifying patterns, themes, and insights that emerge from your interviews or case studies. Lastly, always consider the ethical implications of your research. Make sure your participants understand what the research involves and that they give informed consent. You'll also need to protect their confidentiality and handle data responsibly. To recap, a solid research method is crucial to the success of any study. Quantitative methods are ideal when you want to measure and quantify data, while qualitative methods are best for exploring experiences and perspectives in depth. Sometimes combining both through a mixed methods approach can provide a more comprehensive view. The key is to choose a method that aligns with your research question and objectives. Carefully design your sampling and data collection process and analyze your data rigorously. That's all for today's episode of Take the Leap Management. I hope this discussion has given you a clearer understanding of how to create a strong research method for your study. If you found this helpful, be sure to subscribe and share the podcast with others who might benefit. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep taking the leap in your academic and professional journey.